Hello, I'm Soycat and welcome back to another second channel geography video. This is Evan's favorite series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I wanted to talk about a particularly interesting part of the world and I guess geopolitics really, and that is the idea of how countries came to be. Because a lot of countries, form together by having two smaller countries form into a bigger country. And a lot of the time when you think about that, you just kind of assume one invaded the other and forcibly made that happen. And with empires, this is how this kind of came about. But there's a lot of countries which did willingly unify. The two countries or colonies or whatever came together and figured we can be more powerful if we pool our resources. This is actually how South Africa was made and how it's such a diverse, crazy country. A lot of colonies came together to make one bigger country, and I guess it's fairly successful in that front. I mean, there's also not. But my point being is some countries can come together and unify and make a bigger country, but there's actually a few cases around the world where either international law or, a treaty with another country actually forbids these countries from unifying, and I wanted to talk about those examples in today's video because I thought it was fascinating and worth sharing with all of you. So here are countries which cannot merge together to make a bigger one, and we're going to start actually with Russia and Mongolia. So this is one I thought was rather interesting because the fun fact about Mongolia, let's shock you all if you don't know about Mongolia, is that most of the Mongolian population in the world doesn't live in Mongolia, they live in China, because there's actually two Mongolias, in the same way that China kind of absorbed modern day the Tibet Empire. Tibetans are now just Chinese people as far as China is concerned. The same thing happened to Mongolians. There is an Inner Mongolia, which is, again, it's like roughly the same size by land area, but it actually contains more Mongolians by a significant amount than Mongolia contains as a whole. There's a 24 million population in this zone. Again, it's not even the majority of them are Mongolians. There's a lot of Chinese people, but despite that, because there's 24 million and there's a lot of Mongolians in there, and there's only 3 million people living in Mongolia, that means that surprisingly more Mongolians live outside of Mongolia than in Mongolia. So why do I mention that? Why is that relevant? Well, basically the when Mongolia was being absorbed and all that sort of stuff was happening. Again, there's a lot of crazy times in the world. Russia made a very clear, intention that Mongolia should be an independent country. They wanted, instead of, China going all the way up here, they wanted to have an independent Mongolia. They fought kind of hard for the independent Mongolia, and the Chinese actually did agree, but they agreed under some really strict conditions. At the time, the government, which was the non-communists, they said you can't support the communists, even though you're Russia, and they also said something along the lines of, like, they can never unify with you, because that was actually one of the goals of the Mongolian SSR. Even though, if you look at Mongolia on a map, it's one of the places that kind of looks like it could be part of the Soviet Union. Like this is all Soviet Union, then this is all Soviet Union, then this is all Soviet Union. If you look at Mongolia, it looks like it could have been a part of the Soviet Union, and the truth is that, the Mongolian president really wanted to be part of this, part of the Soviet Union. They wanted to be one of the republics. I think he applied 8 separate times, and every time the USSR just said, no, let's not deal with that, not worth the hassle, whatever. But, it's something he fought for his whole life, and he was always kind of subservient to the Russians, because think about it, you're Mongolia, you're sandwiched between, there's no other borders, that's not a border, that they just have Russia, and they just have China on both sides, they're both global superpowers, they figured it's a bad place to be, and that's something they didn't want. So, yeah, they wanted to reunify with Russia, but even back then, when they were begging to, Russia would not allow them, and that means in today's climate, it really still wouldn't work, because even though it's not the USSR, that agreement still has some weight between Russia and China, and if, Russia did decide to reunify with Mongolia, that would be a serious threat to China, because one of China's problem, in a lot of cases, is that they want to have these buffer states. The reason North Korea exists is just so China can have a buffer state between, China and the South, which is a US-backed country. They want to have these buffer states between, the other, I guess, non-friendly countries, and because of this, Mongolia is a really important thing for China. If Russia were to try and unify into Mongolia, which again isn't really possible in today's climate, it would result in very serious international stuff coming from China, and plus, Russia's doing a pretty bad thing with the whole, just annexing places. So basically, it's not allowed by China. Russia signed an agreement with China they couldn't, and because of that, it would lead to an international situation, which means Russia and Mongolia can never unify. This can never become one of the oblasts of Russia, and in today's world, it realistically wouldn't make sense because Russia doesn't really keep these, SSRs that are separate, but within their own country anymore. But yeah, there you go. Fun fact, first country is Russia and Mongolia. The second example is actually going to be Germany and Austria. So this is one, I know a lot of people will be like, wow, Soycat, your education's so bad. But literally, it was something like 4 years ago, really recently, I genuinely didn't know, back when I really didn't know too much about Europe, I guess. I was speaking about Austria with someone, and I'm like, they speak Austrian there, right? And they're like, no, they speak German in Austria. And I'm like, wait, they just speak German, like in Germany? And yeah, as it turns out, Austria speaks Germany too. So why can Germany and Austria not like combined. Why is that so fascinating? The short answer to this is World War II, and because Austria has a thing in their, legally they have in their constitution, the first line is like, we are not allowed to rejoin with Germany. And the reason that all the other countries made them do this is because a reunified Germany and Austria would be very, very powerful. So the long story on this, because I think it's interesting too, is the fact that basically Europe over the last, I guess 300-ish years kind of became like a big fight. So if we look at a map of Europe in, this is not a map of Europe in 1815, this is a map of Europe in 1815. If you look at a map of Europe from, about 200 years ago, 202 years ago now, right? You can see how France, the UK, Spain, Portugal, even the Scandinavians, if you exclude, Norway being independent, you can see how there's a lot of similarities with a modern day map. If we zoom and get them roughly the same, you can see how there's some really close equivalents. But then if you look at Germany, it's like, whoa, what the heck has happened there? And the simple answer to what happened there is the German parts of Europe were not unified until 1870. That was the first time there was a German state for German people. Instead, German was just a very widespread language. There was a lot of different people groups that spoke it and stuff like that. And basically there was two major, German states at the time, Prussia and the Austrian Empire. It was Austria-Hungary later, but basically both of these two states were kind of vying to be the dominant German state. Towards that time, countries were starting to become unified by languages and people groups, and they figured this is a great opportunity to make a unified Germany. Because previously there was Prussia, which again is pretty big, and there's the Austrian Empire, which is pretty big, and they both had to kind of fight for becoming the Germany, because they both figured it would happen. And because of that, this meant that the German vision they went for was everything in Germany, all German people under one nation, except Austria. We'll leave them out. And basically this is what happened, because Austria, even though it was a larger empire, it was a more, I guess, prosperous empire in some way. They had people groups that didn't speak the language. They had the mountain disadvantage. Austria is very mountainous. And whereas Prussia was building railroads, and it was just a more successful, country at the time. So they eventually, through wars, and they did it, Bismarck did a lot of clever stuff. He's one of my favorite leaders from history. He did a lot of clever stuff, and he re-engineered Germany into a country which existed. And he did that to kind of take all of these places, even Bavaria, which is a huge kind of country here, became a part of Germany, even though it's a lot more similar to Austria. And because of that, Germany became a separate state. And even though Germany and Austria eventually became allied after a long time, when they eventually joined forces in World War II, because you don't know, Hitler was Austrian. He came over, he led Germany, then he combined Austria and Germany. The combined force of them is way too big for a European power. Because again, Europe is pretty well balanced, but the balance of power goes way off if you include Germany and Austria together, or at least it did. Austria is not too powerful anymore, but because of that, the balance of power is way off. And one of the conditions of Austria becoming an independent country, it was split up into 4 separate zones, like Germany was. But the Soviets, unlike in Germany, where they took East Germany and made it Soviet, they're like, okay, Austria, we'll let you be independent, but you have to be neutral. So to this day, Austria, despite being surrounded by NATO states, except Switzerland, but Austria is surrounded by NATO, but they're not allowed to join NATO. They have to be neutral, and they have it explicitly listed that they cannot join with Germany ever. There was kind of a big appetite in Austria before World War II, let's make a big German state. There's a country for German people, it's Deutschland, the land of Germans. The country of German people is Germany's name in German, and they're like, why don't we join there? But now the answer is, well, they're legally not allowed to. It's in their constitution. It would cause an international thing. And honestly, the weird thing about this, though, is even though this is legally not allowed, as the EU, moves towards becoming a country as opposed to a union, eventually Germany and Austria will be part of the same country. Just it'll be part of a much bigger country, and I don't know how they address that when that comes up down the line, but I guess we'll wait and see. That could be a world crisis in 70 years or 80 years. Again, it could never happen. It could go the other way, but the end goal, if a EU is successful, is probably more country-like features. Again, it's going to be very heavily federalized, but that would lead to Germany and Austria. Right now they have the same currency, they have the same European Parliament, and it's interesting to me that that's a way. It's not a loophole, but it's one of the issues that the EU will have to address eventually. They can kick that one down the line for some time now. But let's talk about the final example here, which is actually going to be Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So there were 7 countries, or 6 if you want to be one of those Serbians on the internet that doesn't talk to anyone. They just say, Kosovo is Serbia. What is that? Look at any video with Serbia. Number 2 comment is some dude just Kosovo is Serbia, and it's thanks for doing things on the internet. I don't know why they do it. It's a really rabid Serbian thing. I don't get it personally. I wish I understood it. I know they're angry, but being that angry, I don't go on the internet and type about any angry political opinion, let alone every video. Anyway, point being, Let's talk about Serbia, let's talk about Bosnia, because they both used to be part of Yugoslavia, along with 5 other countries: Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, Croatia, and Slovenia. And Bosnia is the messiest of the Yugoslavian countries, because unlike the other countries, which have pretty clear ethnic majorities, which is how countries kind of form today, Bosnia had the issue of, even though there were Bosniaks who are native to Bosnia and Herzegovina, they don't make up a majority of the population, but instead a lot of Croats live there and a lot of Bosnian Serbs live there. So Bosnian Serbs have a lot more in common with Serbia than they do with Bosniaks, you could argue, and therefore because of that, that a lot of the Bosnian Serbs fought with Serbia and wanted to be part of Serbia when Bosnia became independent. And if I show on a map, even to this day, Bosnia is actually divided very clearly. So let me show you this. There are 2 parts of Bosnia. There is the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is the non-highlighted bits, and then there is Republic Srpska. So Republic Srpska is essentially a country within a country. Like the only way they could alleviate the war in this country was to allow 2 countries to exist within one, but because of that, the Serbian parts of it are forbidden from joining with Serbia. If they do that, it causes a whole bunch of issues. And yeah, basically, Republic Srpska and the Bosnia part exist in the same country, and also to alleviate these fears, because like I said, there's 3 major people groups in this country. You know that image I accidentally showed you earlier? That is the 3 presidents of Bosnia. Bosnia genuinely has 3 presidents. They have 3 people groups, and there's a lot of tensions between those 3. So instead of having this thing where one people group dominates, there has to be, this is the only system in the world like this, there has to be, I don't actually know which one's which here, so I'll guess, there has to be a Serbian president, there has to be a Bosnian president, and there has to be a Croatian president. That is like a requirement that they have to have one of each of the 3, and they all kind of exist at the same time. There's 3 presidents of Bosnia, and yeah, that as well as that, they're not allowed to rejoin with Serbia. They had to go through a whole bunch of peace processes to get here, and they probably don't want to ruin it. But yeah, you go. Republic Srpska, it's an entirely like autonomous part of Bosnia. They use the same currency, and I think that's about it. They have like a massively different tax rate system trying to get foreign investment in, but it's also impossibly difficult to make a business there. There's like, you have to register a business 23 days ahead of doing it. I don't know why 23 days, who decides that sort of thing, but there's a lot of random things about this part of the world that's just like, oh yeah, that's messy. And one of those parts is that they're not allowed to rejoin with Serbia, and there you go, fun fact. So before we end today's video, just a bonus one, because 3 countries, you know, that's no fun. So there is actually one other example of a country which has conditions on if it can reach, unify. So Northern Ireland is a part of the United Kingdom, and Ireland, they cannot rejoin unless both sides agree in a referendum. It's explicitly stated. The Northern Irish, I guess, Prime Minister can't just go to the Irish Prime Minister and say, let's do this. They have to get a full majority of Northern Irish people and of Irish people. The UK, I mean, it doesn't matter to us, apparently. But basically, both those things have to occur. And there was a referendum in Northern Ireland in 1973, as it turns out. I knew it was in the 70s, where the results were like 98.9% in favor of staying and 1% in favor of leaving. And the long story and why that is because everyone in favor of leaving didn't show up to vote, but it got a 58% turnout rate. So basically, a majority do want to stay part of the Northern Ireland, and because of that, to make sure that everyone just understands the situation, there's very explicit agreements that Ireland has to agree, they have to be 100% on board, and so does Northern Ireland. There has to be a double majority, not just like a single or like a, you can't do that like just have a leader do the thing. You have to have referendums, and that's something I thought was fascinating. There's a few other countries kind of like that. But yeah, have you ever dreamed of having Denland or Bella Crane, exist as countries? You might just, but you'll never see a Austria, Germany. There will never be an Anschluss again. There will never be a Mongolia. And we can never see a republic, Serbia, Bosnia and Serbia, whatever. Just there you go. Those things can't exist for a bunch of reasons I just listed. And if you don't remember any of those reasons, then I guess start the video back at 000 and just try again. I mean, maybe it'll work this time. So thank you very much for watching today's video. It's the second channel, so let me quickly remind you that you can check out my Amazon link in the description, and it's like Christmas time-ish. So you'll get I'll get like some percent, you'll get some deals. Maybe do that. Thank you for checking out my sponsor, which is me. And second channel, don't care. Goodbye.